She was the quiet one, hiding scars both visible and invisible, judged by her past and mocked for her strength. But when a battle-worn veteran saw her tattoo, something changed. She wasn't just a woman with scars anymore, she was a survivor, and her story was just beginning. Welcome to the channel. We're glad to have you here. Drop a comment below and let us know which country you're watching from. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Sarah had always been the quiet one in the office. A receptionist at a local law firm, she kept to herself, never drawing attention. Her life, however, was far from simple. Beneath her plain attire, a scar marred her forearm, a constant reminder of the violence she survived during her time as an army medic. Years had passed, but the emotional weight of that night still lingered. The attack, a traumatic event that left her physically scarred, became a part of her. Though she was strong in many ways, she was deeply self-conscious about the scar. She hated how it made her feel exposed, as though her pain was written in ink across her skin. The office gossip didn't help. Her co-workers, ever so quick to judge, would whisper behind her back when they thought she wasn't looking. They would laugh and make snide comments. What happened to her? A wild night out, they would say. The thought that it was something far darker, something she could never put into words, never even let them imagine, made Sarah's chest tighten. She wished she could simply fade into the background and disappear, but the scar, always visible when she rolled up her sleeves, kept her from doing so. One evening, after another long day of feeling small, Sarah found herself staring at her reflection. In the mirror, her scars, both visible and hidden, seemed to consume her, but something inside her stirred. She had survived the darkest chapter of her life. The scars weren't just wounds. They were evidence of her strength, proof that she had fought to live. She thought about the tattoo she had once considered getting, a simple but meaningful design, a tribute to the military unit she had served with, a way to reclaim her body, to make a statement that this was hers, not theirs. The decision wasn't easy. Tattoos were permanent, and Sarah had always been afraid of commitment, afraid of permanence. But there was something in her gut telling her that this was the time. She went to a local tattoo parlor, her heart racing with anticipation. The tattoo artist, a kind woman named Lisa, asked her what the design meant. With a quiet but steady voice, Sarah shared the story of her time in the army, of the mission that had almost cost her her life. The tattoo would be the insignia of the 82nd Airborne, the unit that had given her a purpose when the rest of her life had felt like it was falling apart. When the needle started, Sarah didn't flinch. In fact, it felt strangely healing, as if every line, every dot, was erasing some of the pain she had carried for so long. It wasn't just ink, it was a battle cry. She had survived, and she was going to wear that survival proudly. Sarah walked into the office the following Monday, her tattoo still fresh, but already feeling like a part of her. She wore a long-sleeved blouse, but this time, the cuff was slightly rolled up. She was proud of what she had done. But as soon as she entered the office, she felt the familiar sting of judgment. Emily, the office's golden girl, couldn't hide her smirk. Trying to look tough, huh? She said, loud enough for everyone in the office to hear. Her tone was biting, mocking. I didn't know this was a military recruitment center. Laughter rippled across the room. Sarah's face flushed with heat. Her hands, still trembling from the nerve it had taken to get the tattoo, suddenly felt like lead. She forced herself to smile, but it was thin and tight. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to leave, to go back to her cubicle and hide. She had expected some discomfort, but this mockery, it cut deeper than she thought possible. As the day wore on, the whispers followed her. What's next? Gonna wear a bulletproof vest to work? Emily and her clique continued to make jokes whenever they thought Sarah wasn't listening. And, while they laughed, Sarah fought to hold back tears. She wanted to tell them her story, to explain that the tattoo wasn't just for show, that it was part of who she was now. But how could she, when they already made up their minds about her? It was easier to let the laughter drown her inside. That afternoon, as Sarah made her way to the break room, she ran into an older man in the elevator. He was tall, with a military jacket that immediately caught her eye. The insignia on his arm matched the one on her tattoo. For a split second, Sarah froze, her heart racing in her chest. The man seemed to notice the tattoo at the same moment. He took a step closer and, almost in reverence, said, "Is that the 80 to ND?" Sarah nodded, surprised to find herself meeting the eyes of someone who wasn't mocking her. There was respect in his voice, an understanding that she wasn't used to. You served with them? The man asked gently. Sarah hesitated but answered quietly. I was a medic. The words seemed to spill out faster than she expected. He studied her face for a moment, as if looking for something. You don't need to explain, he said, his voice soft. I was with them too. You're a survivor. I can see it. The kindness in his eyes broke something open inside her. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she wasn't alone in her pain. The man introduced himself as Thomas, a Vietnam veteran. They sat down for coffee later that week, and Thomas shared stories from his time in the military. He spoke of battles fought, friends lost, and the scars that came with both. As he spoke, Sarah realized that his experiences were not all that different from her own. He had tattoos, two symbols of survival, reminders of battles fought long after the physical wounds had healed. His words were full of empathy, and he seemed to understand everything Sarah had been through without needing to hear her story. Your tattoo, Thomas said, after a long silence, is more than ink. It's a reminder that you're still here, that you fought and you survived. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, someone had seen her not as a woman with a scar, but as a warrior who had overcome it. That evening, Sarah found herself sharing the full story with Thomas. She told him about the night she had been attacked, how she had barely escaped with her life, how she had watched a friend die in her arms. She told him about the guilt she carried, the guilt that she hadn't been able to save everyone. The scar on her arm wasn't just from the knife wound. It was the weight of all the lives she couldn't save. As she spoke, her voice faltered. But Thomas didn't interrupt. He listened, with no judgment, no pity. When she was done, he placed a hand gently on hers. You are more than that night, Sarah. Those scars, they're part of you, yes, but they don't define you. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe it. She had carried the weight of her trauma for so long, but now, with Thomas' words, she felt lighter. Her tattoo wasn't just an emblem of survival. It was an emblem of growth, of reclaiming the life she thought she'd lost. Over the next week, Sarah walked into work with a newfound sense of confidence. She no longer hid her tattoo beneath long sleeves. She wore it proudly, showing the world that it was a part of who she was. The office no longer felt like a place where she had to shrink herself. Her co-workers noticed, some with admiration, others with surprise. Emily, too, was quieter, though her teasing had not stopped. But Sarah was no longer affected by it. One afternoon, Jake, a quiet colleague who had always treated her with respect, asked about her tattoo. It's a tribute, Sarah explained, to the people I served with, to the people I couldn't save. Jake nodded, looking at her with a new understanding. That's pretty powerful, he said. Sarah realized in that moment that she didn't need to explain herself to anyone else. She wasn't seeking validation anymore. Her strength was something she had finally begun to own. Sarah met Thomas again at a local veterans gathering. It was a small group, and as she listened to their stories, she realized how much she had in common with these men and women. They had all fought battles, some physical, some emotional. Their tattoos were all unique, but they were united in their shared experiences. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she was part of something larger than herself. The scars they carried were not burdens. They were marks of honor. The following day, Emily approached Sarah, her face more serious than usual. I'm sorry, she said, for the way I treated you. I didn't understand before, but I get it now. I've been hiding my own insecurities, and I projected them onto you. Sarah looked at her, surprised by the apology. It's okay, Sarah said. We all have our battles. In that moment, Sarah realized that the mockery had never been about her. It was about their own fears and insecurities, and she had been strong enough to face those fears head-on. Sarah walked into the office the next day, her tattoo fully visible, her shoulders squared with pride. She had become someone who no longer let her past define her, she defined it. The scar that once held her back was now a symbol of strength, a reminder of everything she had overcome. She shared her story with others, and in doing so, inspired them to embrace their own scars. As for Thomas, he watched from a distance, proud of the woman Sarah had become. And for the first time, Sarah felt that she wasn't just a survivor. She was a warrior, and she wore that title with honor.